Penguin Random House Canada presents All the Parts We Exile by Roza Nozari. Read for you by the author. For my mother and my sisters. For Story, Storm, Jacob, and Micah. I will have my serpent's tongue, my woman's voice, my sexual voice, my poet's voice. I will overcome the tradition of silence. Gloria E. Anzaldúa, Borderlands. 1. Departures. I was desperate to leave my sister's house. At 26, I'd been living in Yara's basement in a suburb of Toronto for the past 2 years. Mom was newly separated from her second husband and planned on moving in too. I couldn't get the visual of us sharing a 5-by-4 meter room in the basement out of my head. Cohabitating like partners, bickering over her loud snoring or my tendency to leave candy wrappers around. I also couldn't bear to have Yara, the responsible eldest daughter, take care of not one, but 2 grown adults in the family. She had a habit of taking us in if any of us were short on money or needing a place to stay. When Mom started asking incessantly if we could get a 2-bedroom together, I started panic reviewing listings on the internet for myself. The salmon tone triplex I found in the queer online ads was tucked onto a tree-lined street, cars parked bumper to bumper, and middle-class couples decked out in athleisure speed-walking their dogs. A 5-minute walk away, you'd find yourself in old Chinatown. Little bakeries selling coconut buns and red bean sesame balls next to modern thrift stores and coffee shops. The apartment was a maximalist dream. Ornate couches thrifted from garage sales, gold-framed art busily scattered across the walls, and giant windows to let in the sun. The person living there was interested in keeping the home queer. When I heard the rent was $600, I asked how quickly I could move in, half-jokingly. 5 days before moving into my first Toronto apartment, I invited Mom to come with me to see the place. 15 minutes into the drive, she was already complaining that the apartment was too far away and that it would be difficult for her to get to me. As we arrived and walked up the driveway, I noticed her glaring at the building's peeling paint. Hoping for her blessing, I quickly tried to steer her in a positive direction. "It's so cute, right? Pink. It's a pink house." I could feel there was finality to this transition, and maybe, on some level, she could too. Having just finished graduate school, I was launching myself into a social work career. No more returning to Yara's. The practical benefits of free room and board had often outweighed my desire for independence. This time, it wasn't a desire for independence, though. It was an uncompromising need. Like if I stayed, I would fall into a chaotic existential crisis that would culminate in some sort of death of self. Or worse, I'd land in a Freudian nightmare with an Oedipal mother smothering me into a regressive state, forever her baby. We walked up the stairs of the triplex, Mom remarking on how filthy the carpet was. "But I won't be sleeping here, right?" I chuckled awkwardly, trying to soften her stern face. I walked first into the apartment, guiding her past a stuffed clothing rack in a narrow hallway. Mom took off her shoes and I led her into the bedroom directly in front of the door. Immediately, her hesitation transmuted into anger. "Oh my God," her eyes widened. "You're not moving here." "It's not that bad, Mom." "Oh my God, the carpets!" She slapped her hand against her cheek. "The carpets!" she exclaimed again in English, pretending to faint. It was rare for her to speak English unless it was to punctuate a moment like this, which worked well because much of her English vocabulary came from watching soap operas. Admittedly, while the living room was beautiful, This room was in pretty terrible shape. There was a giant bloodstain on the mattress, dark tire tracks across the ceiling, and a beige carpet that looked like it had never been cleaned. Even then, I wasn't going to let Mom know that I knew how bad the room was. It was $600 a month, and to me, its character made up for its flaws. Mom looked up at the ceiling, then down at the carpet, and shuddered. "You're going to need a Persian rug for these floors," she muttered. She continued onward to the living room, where my soon-to-be roommate and their friend were assembling a table. Pieces of wood were scattered across the floor, blocking our entry. "Who is this man?" she whispered to me in Farsi. Mom immediately backed up and beelined to the door. I mouthed the word, "Sorry," to my soon-to-be roommate and followed her out, embarrassed by her behavior. The whole way back to the car and back home, Mom repeated the word no. At some point, I wondered if she'd forgotten her mouth was still saying no. I sat silently, listening to her weave between no and rants about how we didn't come all the way to this country to have her university-educated daughter with graduate degrees move into a dirty apartment in the city with roommates. "You'll wait until something better comes," she declared. I was familiar with this part of Mom. A dragon whose fiery breath would, at best, push me away, and at worst, burn me. At other times, a snake wrapping its body around me, not noticing my constricted, slowing breath. In moments like these, my frustration was also blended with curiosity about where it all came from. I had become acutely aware that my mother had lived a life before me, and whatever had existed there continued to haunt her well into her 50s. Its cold, blue claw would suddenly zombie its way into her body, a possession of sorts that left me disoriented. Like, where did my mother, the kind, empathetic, curious one, go when the dragon in her arose? My family immigrated to Canada before I was born, and what I knew of what preceded me and what had shaped my mother came in bits and pieces that I had to pry out and probe for. Mom was mostly tight-lipped about her past. From the timeline I'd stitched together, I knew that they left Iran in 1990, a couple years after the war between Iran and Iraq had officially ended. The simplified version is that in the aftermath of the 1979 revolution, the Shah was ousted and the Islamic regime took over, newly governing the country with a restrictive, conservative version of Islamic law. With the establishment of surveillance forces like the morality police, women's rights were deteriorating quickly, from their right to vote to their autonomy over how they dressed and behaved in public. Watching rights being stripped away, my parents wondered what future was possible for themselves and their daughters. Beyond that, with such little work coming their way, they wondered if there was more opportunity elsewhere. The move itself was where the details thinned. In September of 1990, they were living in Isfahan, a city at the center of Iran where they'd both grown up. My father was a truck driver. Mom stayed home raising Yara and Yasaman, who were 9 and 8 at the time of leaving. With hopes of ensuring a safe future for their children, they decided to travel to Turkey, and from Turkey made their way to Canada, where they claimed asylum. The lack of emotion and detail when Mom told the story always left me unsatisfied, striving for something more with a barrage of questions. Perhaps I knew that there was more to the story than what she shared. 6 months after the move, Mom was pregnant with me. Her yearning for her family and home deepened in ways that felt like quicksand. The more she thought of them, the more she sank into an unrelenting ache. Memories of the last time she was pregnant flooded her. Her last pregnancy was Yasaman, when she was rushed to the hospital 2 months early. Worried about whether Yasemen would survive, her mother stood by her hospital bed, stroking her hair.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?